Without a quorum present this evening, I unfortunately cannot call the regular meeting of the Co-op Budget Committee officially to order due to the last-minute illness of a member who was scheduled to attend. So what we will plan on doing this evening is go through our meeting, our agenda as if it were a typical meeting. We, as I said, unfortunately can't officially call to order, but we're live streaming and the meeting will be posted on YouTube and available to be reviewed, and we'll have a debate and conversation about the agenda topics this evening, but we just won't be making any motions or official decisions as gathered members of the Budget Committee. So with that in mind, I would still like to introduce myself, Darlene Mann, the chair of the Co-op Budget Committee, and the members present for this evening's meeting, which include Raul Blanchet, Tom Whalen, and Tom Solon, Tom Enright, Dave Blinn, Brian Rader, and Matt McGuire would all have excused absences in a typical fashion and if we had called to order. So with about half of us present, we'll proceed as best we can, and I invite you all to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I forgot to introduce Kelly Seeley. How could I forget? Our business administrator for the district this evening. I will make one slight agenda adjustment and hold the calendar discussion until we do the school board update, because I think some of the issues related to the calendar and meeting dates and things would come up in review of the conversation, the joint conversation that took place at the board meeting. So I would just like to push that down to the kind of end of our conversation. Since we're not officially called to order, I'll skip over appointing a meeting observer. We will not be approving minutes, and there's no public present. And so we'll move right into the monthly results review for the current fiscal year.
Okay.
You say what, if you're looking at any documents, could you say which one it is so I can try and find the right files to follow along?
Sure. This one is the FY25 Co-op Revenue and Expense Report.
Okay.
And the explanations. That document. Yep. FY25 Co-op Revenue Expense Explanation. Those two items.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this is, the first quarter of the school year, so everything is encumbered because we assume it's all going to be spent, but as we all know, there are various reasons that that things are not spent, and we do start off with some vacancies that are in play, and we did have some savings in the summer program, the ESY program in special ed, and there are also currently some out-of-district savings that you'll see in special education as well. But we do have some inklings of information that may cause that wonderful $176,000 to go away. So just be forewarned. But as a result, right now we're showing a projected fund balance of $2,000. So, but I wouldn't get too excited about that.
As you said, it is early in the year,
yeah,
and
it is.
Lots of things need to obviously play out over the course of the year. So.
Yes, very much so. Does anybody have any questions?
Are there a significant number of vacancies across the district? Is that situation just better than it has been in prior years? Or
it's definitely better. We do not have a school psychologist in the middle school, and I believe I think we are now fully, all of the pairs are hired, but that took a month or so to get there, so some of that.
So contract services for the middle school psychologists, or are they shared with the high school? Or?
Yeah, contracted services is really where we're going with that. We do have some other contracted services involved as well, but not too many. I think that position is the only one that's not filled, but I could be missing someone.
Okay.
What's the, where are you seeing the $2,000 that you're referring
At the
to?
very, on the second page, down projected fund balance at the bottom.
On, is this on the report page?
No,
It's
not
on the
It's on
report
the
page.
second page,
It's
the
on the
revenue
explanation
page.
page?
It's not on
Right.
the explanation page, right?
No, it's not on the explanation
Right,
page.
okay.
Did you see it? And that $2,000 does assume that several things as
Oh,
far
right,
as
okay,
using
it's
the
on
fund
the
balance
The other one.
Oh,
from
okay.
the expense. And we haven't decided for sure what the maintenance trust number is, or the retained fund balance, or the contingency. So those are placeholders right now.
Expense and revenue report.
So, if we're going into contracted services, are you, for some of the positions, do you think that, may flip the other way where we will not have the full amount projected to cover those placeholders?
No, I think right now we have enough savings in out-of-district placements in ESY that we are covering those at this time. But, I mean, obviously if we get new students or something like that, or,
Anything, it can change.
yeah, right.
Thank you.
Okay?
Great, thank you. Let's go, so the next item on the agenda is a budget overview. So the information that I shared as part of kind of two packets of information that went out included the budget trend file today, as well as a summary of historic rates from New Hampshire retirement, and we had just the enrollment information from NESDEC was just shared after the first agenda items were sent out, and I've included that in the packet today. So from like an assumption, just kind of overview of where we are with the budget file. The budget file that we currently have has a page to calculate guidance, which is typically what we use the October meeting for, kind of have an overview of where I think it's round 2 of the budget currently stands, take some things into consideration and give guidance, or like a, you know, conceptually talk about where we would anticipate as a budget committee the budget should fall. So in order to arrive at that decision, we have a complete budget trend file that goes back for several years, budget to actual comparisons. It's a significant file of over 800 lines. There's a superintendent's view that I believe is a direct download, right, Kelly, from our financial system, including some
Yes.
summary information. And then we have a new items section of the spreadsheet that is the round by round, you know, overview, decisions that get made on the budget. So round 1 is kind of the internal starting point for the business office, and there might even be a round 0 at some point
There
once
is,
things
yeah.
get going. But this typically goes out to round 3 or round 4 as we go through this process, and it's the place we typically start to just kind of get an overview for things that we're expecting for the upcoming budget for FY26. So what we know from the conversations we've had from the budget committee, we know there'll be some facilities items that will be brought forward at some point. I expect we've had input from various members of the budget committee who are members of the facilities committee that's overseeing those projects, and what is going to be brought forward to the district. And so I expect we'll hear about some of that as we get through to the maintenance section of the new items. But maybe, Kelly, if you could lead us through just that overall sense of where these new items are leading us for right now. From a budget, a contract perspective, we'll have a HESA negotiation, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's for the support staff. The HEA, our professional staff, it has a standardized agreement, so there's no collective bargaining, active negotiation for that group. I did share the NHRS rates. They change every 2 years, and what we're seeing for the second 2-year cycle in a row is a reduction to NHRS rates, so the rates that are payable to the New Hampshire retirement system. So for professional staff, the rate will go down 2.1% from today's rate, and for the support staff, 7.1% lower than where we are right now. So those are nice changes to see it in a
Did you say 7 point?
7.1% lower.
One.
Yes.
Is that percentage of what it was?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so the percent that the professional staff now that the district would pay into NHRS for FY26 and FY27 would be 19.23% versus 19.64, which is what's paid today. And for the support staff, eligible support staff, employees would be 12.87% in 26 and 27 versus 13.85, which is what's paid today.
So 0.4% change is 7% of it?
For the professional staff, a 0.4 percentage point change is a 2% reduction, and it's almost a 1% calculated reduction, which is a 7% reduction year over year. So it's a nice movement, and what the New Hampshire retirement system has been doing over I think we're a little past halfway through a 30-year, I like to call it like a 30-year mortgage. It was like a payback to the rainy day fund. So over a period of time, they've been adding and trying to pay back the state for some use of funds. So the reduction that we see is due to, you know, sound investments and a bigger return on investment that then leads to less having to be collected from employers in the state.
So they've benefited from the enormous gains on the market gains in the last
Yeah.
Bonds and-
4 years.
So it is nice to see.
Have you calculated yet what the total, the actual dollars, right, on percentages?
Oh yeah, Kelly has
Okay,
has these
she's
rates,
got
and
it,
that's
okay.
all calculated in the budget trend file based on where we are, you know, where we anticipate being for the staff. So those are incorporated.
I had kind of a side question. I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I was looking at the numbers and I noticed that there's a differential between the educators' retirement funds and, say, the police and fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you know why that is? Is
I
there
could-
a rationale behind that?
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure, but that's a good follow-up.
I'm just
for-
curious about
because
why that would be.
it's by a magnitude. I mean,
can think of it for a couple of reasons. I know that their health insurance premiums are higher because of higher risk.
Yep.
My suspicion is that there is probably, which one's higher?
Teachers are much higher for us to contribute to
My guess is.
than the town.
my
no,
ge-
well,
contributions.
police and fire are like 30% versus teachers that are like 19 and
Okay,
change.
all right, it's the other way.
And then for state employees, so who are not police and fire, they're more aligned to our support staff, which is like the 12 to 13% range.
My guess is that they're probably not getting the same level of contribution in, so they're having to back fund with a smaller pool of people actually contributing.
But aren't you basing on the number of subscribers?
Well, you look at the number of people who are collecting
Right.
and the number of people
Oh,
who are
I see.
contributing.
Okay, so there's more retired fire and police than
And
there are teachers.
they anticipate that the number of people that will be eligible will probably increase and then drop, but for the time being, the people who are paying into it to fund.
No, that makes sense, yeah. Fire and police also retire younger, so they're gonna last longer. There'll be more of them in the retired ranks, I suppose, theoretically.
We hope.
I just realized I quoted the wrong rates for our support staff. What I quoted as the 7% reduction was for the state employees. The other reduction is a 5.7% reduction for our support staff.
5.7, okay.
From 13.53 to 12.75%. My apologies for that.
But that was a good side discussion on.
Just out of
process.
curiosity, I
Yeah,
knew there had to be
yeah.
a reason, but.
I feel like I have heard the reason in the past and
Yeah.
just haven't.
I like Tom's explanation, it makes
yeah.
sense. I'll go with that.
It doesn't necessarily have to be true, but as long as it sounds good, it works in this
It's,
environment.
it makes sense.
Kelly, is the middle school boilers in this,
Yes.
under what?
Facilities, I believe.
Why don't we just jump right in on that new,
Oh, it's under safety and compliance.
Oh.
Yeah, the 950
Mhm.
pipes. I
Mhm.
saw that in the
yeah.
summary.
Oh, okay. I was looking at facility. That's why I didn't see it. Thanks.
Yeah, I stuck
And you,
it
it
in.
made it through to round 2?
Yeah, it better. It better make it through. Okay, so you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, if you don't.
Sorry, I'm kind of fighting a cough today, but so I'll just probably go through the highlights. So, I mean, I'm sure you don't care about every single $600 thing here. So, under the heading of academics in the middle school, we did the life skills classroom renovation. We did one this summer, and we'll do another one next summer. And plus, they want to renovate the former family and consumer science room, which is now a special ed room. So that room will have a cool down room and then some renovations involved as well when all is said and done.
So the drop from 50 to 25, is that because we already did some of it?
Yes, that is exactly why. And then another notable one on this section is the science tables. We're replacing all of the tables in every single science room, so that accounts for the expense there.
Do you know why?
They're end of life. Some of them are beyond end of life, so it's time. It hasn't been that long ago that we did the high school, so it's now time to do the middle school. And then as far as textbooks go, I'll talk about both schools. The middle school has math textbooks that they would like to replace. The high school is replacing the AP psychology textbook as well as French 1 and 2. Under the heading of personnel, excuse me, interestingly enough, as far as regular ed goes, there's really no positions on here, you'll see. There's mostly stipends. There is one position on here that we have zeroed out for round 2, and that's the maintenance trades position. That's meant to be a position that would service all 3 districts it would be one person that has the wonderful talents of being an electrician, an HVAC person, and all of those things that we go out to contract with another vendor. Lance feels like we can save money by having more of an expert in those areas, but it hasn't quite made it. I think this is either the second or the third year that we've seen it.
So, how was that decision reached? Do you know?
Which decision?
to not fund it, because I thought that there was a beneficial financial case presented. Is it that it's no longer a beneficial financial case to
No, it's really about priorities, I think. And there is, 1, maybe 2 districts that may not be able to afford that position, their share of that position.
But if they're, I guess this is a confusion. It's not like there's work, we're not going to do the work that this person would do.
Correct.
We're instead going to do it with outside contracted services,
Correct.
which we were told is more expensive. So by dropping that out, it would seem that you would have to increase another area to
No,
cover-
because we would have the same,
So
just
did
like
you-
now, there's no increase to it.
Then when you had it in, had you dropped those areas?
No, I hadn't got that far yet, no, but that's definitely a good consequence.
So I guess rather than have it drop out, I'd rather wait and see if the projected savings is greater than the projected cost.
No, and I understand what you're saying, and if this was just about the co-op, I think that would be a no-brainer. But it's also about Hollis and Brookline.
Cause it's not
So-
saving costs for them?
It could, but it may not be, I don't think this is going to be a savings that would get rid of other costs completely, you know what I mean?
I
think
understand, but
it's-
if there's a net savings to overall, I would think it would be proportional in the sense that if the co-op savings is gonna be greater, then the co-op costs can also be greater. If overall it's going to save money and it's one or two taxpayer pools, I just think it's premature to cancel it.
To cancel the
I
contract.
guess.
To cancel the consideration of it simply because we're only looking at one side of it so far.
There should be an offset in maintenance costs.
Yeah,
System.
that's the
So-
whole reason for doing it, by having, we bought a truck so we could plow
Yeah.
certain areas. We're talking about having someone so we don't have to hire external electricians and plumbers for everyday activities. So if we've got someone who's got those licenses, if they're going to be doing most of their work in the co-op, then the cost of the co-op should be most of it, and if that still presents a savings, I would think that it would still be advantageous.
So is the split right now like a third, a third, a third?
No, it would probably be more like a 50, 25, 25.
Do you agree with it?
Yeah, but I also understand Kelly's point that in balancing it across three
Well-
districts,
But even if it's 80-10-10, and
yeah.
if that 80%
Mhm.
of the total cost is still less than what the co-op will be spending for those
I don't know,
services.
80%, that may not do it, but.
I don't know what the
yeah,
number is,
I
but
don't either. We haven't finished the analysis yet. I mean, we can certainly leave it as a discussion point for the future, but it may end up being mostly the co-op that pays for it, so.
well, maybe.
Or maybe we may defer the solution until we know more about.
Well, we've been
the-
deferring it for 3 years, that's the concern. So every year, for whatever reason, the analysis never gets completed.
Okay.
Well, I
And-
think it's a prioritization issue.
Yes.
in Considering other
100%.
things, so as we're setting guidance and other districts, are setting guidance as well and trying to see a budget come in, you're just prioritizing
Yes.
other needs
Yes,
above that.
and-
I understand the
But we're
perspective of.
increasing our budget.
Right, because we're contracting services and potentially paying more, I understand, but,
If we use the same logic then we would never hire a psychologist, for example, or a speech therapist, or any of those. And I think, especially now that we've got aging schools and external services, the rate of those are going up rapidly. Even if it was only a co-op position, I'd still advocate looking at it.
Okay, and we certainly can. Yeah, I don't see a problem with doing more research
Yeah.
on it.
Lance is always looking for something to do, so he can do the analysis.
Is that the same Lance we're talking about?
I'm curious about it, Kelly, about the assignment of the cost. If it's gonna be district-wide, is that something we
You mean
could leave at the,
SAU-wide?
SAU-wide, yes. Would that be better served if we just put it in the SAU budget?
No.
And allocate it?
No.
And then build out to the different districts on an hourly basis?
No, what we do a lot of this, charging and then,
Yeah.
sending out the cost to the other districts, and we can't do it in the SAU because we have no cash flow and we have a very tiny budget. There's just no wiggle room there.
Well, we have to increase the budget, obviously, but it would be an offset in your billings to the school district.
It would, but you still have to make sure you have the cash flow to cycle through everything. And
Yeah, I
it's-
guess that's
I mean, and there
that's
is, if, as you go back and look at it, Kelly, I mean, if, there, again, it is a priority issue as well, and as you're looking at it, maybe it does become, if it's something that's more co-op related,
Mhm.
then it really is almost a build, like, that's our internal contractor to the other districts on an as-needed basis for certain jobs and things like
Yeah,
that.
it could be
And
an
that
as
could- that
needed.
could- and as they ramp up and maybe have more availability in their budgets, then we kind of split a different way, but.
Especially if we could, if the co-op could bill out that time
Yeah.
at the same price that they're paying for external
Sure.
Yeah.
contractors.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there is also a concern that we can even find this person,
Yeah.
and if we're pricing it appropriately,
Oh, no,
it may
no,
be
I
twice
understand.
this cost,
Yeah.
you know?
If,
Yeah.
if
So-
you said to me, the math doesn't work, I would have no argument, but what I'm hearing is, we haven't had a chance to do the math completely.
That is correct, yes.
And this has been a persistent suggestion and recommendation at the highest level, because not only is there potential for cost savings, but from what I understand, response time and impact on the operation of the districts
Excuse me.
would benefit as well. So I just hate to see it abandoned prematurely.
That's very fair, and we can continue to look at that, yes.
And when that analysis is completed, we'll also have, include how we would, arrange for each district to pay the cost of
Yeah, that's all.
the individual.
Yeah.
If we just keep it as a SAU-wide position.
Right.
Okay,
Sorry.
noted. No, that's noted, and we'll continue to look at that. Excuse me. So, the only other thing I want to say in this section is that the school board has been working on stipends, and they have come to some decisions for this year, and I believe there's more work to do for next year. So we do have an allowance in here for restructuring the stipends that continue to be done by the school board, the work that continues to be done. Okay, so next up is special ed personnel, and we have two positions in this area. We have one position that would be split between the middle school and the high school, and that's a BCBA, which, to remind you, is a board certified behavior analyst. And the other position is an IDD teacher. That stands for an intellectual or developmental disabilities teacher. And Lauren is definitely looking at dropping what we call the NEC paras. Boy, that's the one I didn't write down. I can't tell you what that stands for. They come into our, we hire the actual paras that work in this program, but there is one person that comes into the building from this company to work here in our two schools. So that program will likely be dropped, and the paras would be, redistributed in other areas. So that's where the
So
savings.
is that almost like a staffing agency for
Kind of.
those kind of disciplines?
Kind of, but it's one person and then the program around that person, so. Okay, and then
And so we're able to just service students another way in-house.
Yeah, as far as I understand, she's going to sort of revamp how we use that program and turn it into.
We've had it for a while.
Yeah, we have, and I think it was great when we
Yeah.
had it, but
Yeah.
I think we're kind of outgrowing,
Uh-huh.
or the students that we have now just don't need those kind of services now.
Right.
And then we have a $15,000 cost in special ed materials to beef up the SEL program as well as the self-contained program. And that self-contained program is part of dropping the NEC program as well. We have nothing showing in new computer equipment, but we do have under replacement computer equipment, we have our device plan that we have mapped out for, it was a 5-year plan.
Which
And
year are we on? 3, 4?
this is probably year 3, I think, or could be year 2.
In this budget? Or the one we're in right now is 3 and this would be 4?
Oh, no, the one we're in right now, is that the second year? Second or third?
Yeah,
I'm not 100%
okay.
sure. I think it's actually the second year that we're in now, so
Mhm.
this would be the third. So this is, you know, the standard between the two schools for student Chromebooks, staff Chrome laptops, Windows laptops, staff Chromebooks, and then our interactive flat panels. So this has all been evaluated in that 5-year plan. And it shouldn't be substantially different than it was in the previous year and all years following. Under the heading of shared services and software, we have two things, and this is an SAU-wide thing, so there's a cost share for each district. And the first one is a centralized firewall security monitoring, and please know that I am not an IT person. So this, as I understand it, is a way to monitor the firewall in terms of security and to do it in a what's the word, sort of automated way rather than having humans having to do all these things, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong when the humans are changing these things, and this is a system that will do all that for us.
Is that something we're doing, or are we hiring a contractor to do it for us?
No, I think it's just
It's a
software
subscription
that does
service.
it, yeah.
In my company, a lot of those types of services have been transitioned to Microsoft. So Microsoft is really subcontracting to us to maintain a lot of the networks.
I don't think we have those
and the
kind of
security.
dollars.
So I don't know if this is
We're not-
large enough to be able to
No.
do this sort of thing.
We're not in a
Most
Windows
definitely not.
environment, unfortunately, so.
Yeah.
So what this is a purchase add-on that.
So this will be an app that we purchase
Yep.
for so many
Yes.
devices, right?
Yes. And then the second one is like a help desk. It's called Incident IQ. It's a help desk and asset management. The asset management is what we really, really need. We do have a help desk now, but it's free. This will cost us some amount of money, but it's a better system than what we have right now.
To minimize frustrations, right?
Yes, definitely.
When you say asset management, what kind of assets are you?
Computers, basically.
okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we get more high tech and more complicated. You need, at some point, you need
Oh,
experts
absolutely.
to help you.
Yeah, this new tech plan is great
Yeah.
until you start talking about asset management, and then it's like, blah.
Yeah.
So yes, we definitely need to grow our support behind all the devices that are coming into the schools.
There are consequences to all this modernization, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so then under the heading of athletics, there are a few things, but the most important one there, I think, is the wrestling mats. They are currently like 11 years old, so it's
I'm
time.
laughing a little bit because I remember the conversation getting
I
the
do
last
too.
set of wrestling mats.
Yes.
And
I
it was
do
a
too.
whole, we used to meet in
In
the
the
multi-purpose
NPR, yeah.
room.
Yes, I
and,
think that
to
took
try
a
to get
couple,
those
3 times
wrestling
to
mats.
get, yeah.
Mhm.
But the other thing, and that's what I'm thinking of also, that I thought got purchased out of the athletic trust last time, or at least a portion of it did.
Perhaps. I don't have that
Do
good a
we-
memory.
Because that was viewed as an appropriate cost to be covered from the pay-to-play fees. Has any consideration been given to using funds from that area to cover this?
There's a whole summary that we usually get a little bit later
Right.
in the process that breaks down the full athletic budget between the
Yeah.
revolving fund and the budget.
Right, we have a pretty standard budget for that, for the reserve fund right now. I mean, I suppose we could consider it, but then something would have to come out of there that normally is there.
Because
To
we-
go
we-
back in.
We pretty much drain it right now?
We do. I mean, there is a balance in there, but it's not tremendous. I
Okay.
forget what it is.
So this is not one of the items that gets budgeted into it. I know we do some uniforms, we do other
Right,
supplies.
and so the way we've been using it is to do like really standard things, and it's pretty much always the same. So like new items like this, we wouldn't necessarily put in
Gotcha.
there because it's really standard and consistent year after year.
Have we hit up the Booster Club lately?
I suppose, I don't know. That's a Brian question, let me ask him.
Yeah, Wrestling Booster Club usually contributes quite a bit to the program every year.
Yeah.
They bought that big center light they have. You know, the center. They have a
I haven't been.
big
Oh, do they?
Thunderdome light in the middle.
Does that have a disco ball attached?
I think it does.
Okay, so
Fence.
under the heading of safety and compliance issues, we have a couple of big ones there. Well, the smaller one is the school guard glass. So if you'll recall the SAFE grants that we received for this year, we've been trying to install school guard glass in all 6 schools. And this is sort of just a continuation of that. I don't know if the SAFE grant will be available or not, but that's what this is about. We want to try to eventually replace all of the door glass and the window glass with this kind of glass in all of our schools. So we're allotting, you know, an amount for every school. I think every school has 25,000 in it.
Kelly, was that recently done to the front doors at CSDA?
Yes, I believe they just completed
'Cause
CSDA.
I was in there Monday night, and what attracted us, there was a strange smell, and we were trying to figure out what it was, and we were
Oh.
looking at it, we could see that all the glass had been replaced in the front door.
Yep.
So it was part of
Yep.
this program kind of thing.
Yeah, that is exactly it. I mean, it took like 6 months to get this glass here. We ordered it like, I don't know, what is it, May or something like that. And it's just taken forever, and it's just finally starting to come in. And CSD, I think, was the first one that
Does in the
was replaced.
cost include the cost of refurbishing the doors, like scraping and painting as well?
Well, if the door needs to be replaced because the structure of it is maybe so old, or
No, it's not that. The glass framework is actually smaller than what was there, we noticed. So
Okay.
there's an area around the outside which had previously been covered by molding and stuff.
Mm.
I didn't know if now they have to go in and scrape the doors and repaint them to keep them corrosion
yeah,
free.
I
and
don't know
things.
that, but that's a good question. I'm sure that's something we can do internally if that's not included. I'll have to ask Lance on that one. And then, of course, the big one is the $950,000 for our boiler replacement here at the middle school. And that is the minimum amount, because as you'll probably hear, the committee is definitely working on additional pieces of that story, which, you know, we'll find out more about. In the high school, we're looking to replace a fire pump that is at end of life. I believe it's an original fire pump. So that has been, I mean, it's still working now, but it's absolutely on its last legs. We also are looking at some exterior cameras that are not covering blind spots currently, or there are blind spots that we need to cover. And both schools are looking for either a speed bump or a speed table or two to control some of our traffic speeds that we're seeing every year increase. We are also SAU-wide trying to get the same radios, walkie-talkies, whatever you want to call them, so that we can eventually move to having repeaters in the buildings and a system similar to what the town of Hollis has purchased.
A lot of that was paid for from grants too.
Right.
I don't know if that's
We did submit a grant to get those, and we did not get it.
Didn't get it.
So we instead of going that route where we get a grant to do everything, we're gonna try baby steps to get to that point. So the first step is to get everybody on the same radio,
Right,
which
okay.
we have 6 different kinds right now. So that will be the first step.
This says it's phase 2.
Yes,
What
because
was phase 1?
because in this year we were able to purchase some with funds that we had left over from last year in certain areas. So both the high school and the middle school got a small amount of them for this year. So
And how many phases are there?
that's a good question. 3 or 4 probably. I'm hoping for 3. So
What's the total count that you wanted to get? Do you know? Because this
No,
is saying
I-
it's 20.
yeah, I don't know yet. We didn't approach it that way. We're trying to minimize the cost by picking a small amount, and if this passes, then phase 3 will, I'm hoping we'll just get the rest of them. Okay, so that's the big ones for safety and compliance. So facilities and maintenance, both schools are looking to do some paving. The middle school is looking to do the front lot here, and the high school has 3 sections they started out with, and we've narrowed that down to the front drive and the kitchen driveway. And then both schools are looking to do some flooring. And let's see, what else is a good one to point out?
Kelly, on the roofing for the middle school, which has been zeroed out,
Yes.
based on the discussion we had at the facility meeting,
Yes.
if we go to consider rooftop installations,
Yes.
that would probably require that all the roofing be done prior to that. Do you know
Well,
how
yeah,
many
whatever roofing that the solar will be on, yeah, for sure,
so
yeah.
how many phases, we've got 10, we use 10 to do the
Mhm.
high school. Do you know how many phases in total would be needed to do the middle school the way it's currently parsed out?
We have not identified it to the level of that level yet, so we were focusing on phase
Okay.
1, and then we'll get to that, exactly how many phases we have. And it's actually not zeroed out, it's just, we put it into the maintenance expendable trust, that's what the blue shaded,
Oh, that's what that means?
yeah,
Okay.
I think on that topic, we'll need an answer probably sooner rather than later, right?
yeah.
Yeah, probably, I didn't get a feel, Raul, I don't know if you did, of when they'd actually target installation, which fiscal year, 'cause I know we talked about seeking funding, but that too, they talked about it being potentially a phased approach for the installation, partly because of the fact the roof is being done, so I don't have a clear picture of that. Do
But
you?
in that solution, the step that would take time would be replacing roof,
Yeah.
not
Not the installation
not
of
the
other stuff.
installation of the
Yeah.
equipment.
Yeah, so we'll have to flesh that out. You're
Yeah,
right.
we definitely we don't have enough answers on that one for sure. So I think that pretty much rounds out the big items in facilities and maintenance, and then if you wanna just pop down to the maintenance expendable trust, you'll see the 2 roof sections, the last one for the high school and the first one for the middle school. And then also, $68,000 for the, elevator retrofit will just go to the trust and sit there, because that's I think that's a
I think that was
4-year,
4.
ask every,
Mhm.
it was 68,000 every 4 year, or every year, sorry.
So it's just like a sinking fund, we're gonna throw money into it until you have enough to.
Right,
Well,
'cause the
do the
total
whole
cost
thing
is
all at once, right?
200,000, although it's probably gonna be more than that by the time we get there.
Understood.
So, yeah, we're just trying to minimize the cost so we don't do it all at once and save money, 'cause it doesn't need to be done right now, but it most likely will be needed
That's
to be
the
done.
feeling was they wanna have the money accumulated within 5 years so that unless there's something catastrophic, we can deal with it before it becomes
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Good approach.
exactly.
scary when it happens.
So, those are the highlights.
Great. So I'd like to just, start our discussion on preliminary, unless anyone has any more specific questions for Kelly, we can talk a little bit about preliminary guidance and where we anticipate things being, and we'll get, which will eventually, I anticipate, go into a discussion about, some facilities items and things like that,
Mhm.
just based on where the budget is. So, if you recall, we have a formula that we use to adjust the existing FY '25 budget, make some consideration for things known changes and things we anticipate for '26, and consider things like CPI and,
HRS.
yeah, NHRS, all kinds of things to determine and give guidance to where we would anticipate the operating budget. So exclusive of the warrant articles for HESA, for the Facilities Trust, for any facilities maintenance items that need to be funded outside of the operating budget or trust, the contingency, the special education trust fund. So this is strictly the operating budget that we're considering guidance on. So we start with the FY25 budget, remove those items that we wouldn't basically want adjusted by CPI, determine what percentage of the remaining base is related to salaries, which again wouldn't be determined by a factor as much as it is by collective bargaining agreements. We come up with a multiplier that gets applied to the reduced base to come up with an amount to add to the budget. We add back some of those anticipated items and come up with an operating budget. In doing so and adding back those items, we might make some considerations for things, some kind of larger extraneous projects or things that need to be considered. For this go around looking at FY26, I would consider those items to be the piping repairs for the middle school and a conversation about our health insurance increase depending on where our rates fell with this last cycle. So what I've shared with you is a view using that typical formulaic way we've gone about addressing guidance, and to the right of that I've included another method that of calculating guidance that's based off of the FY24 actuals, and then gets the same type of adjustments we would adjust normally looking at to establish guidance, but what happens with the year-end results is that those results get adjusted for things that were approved for FY25. And where that's particularly important this year is that obviously for FY25, the HEA agreement had a substantial change to the salary components and would have had it would have to be something added in to the actuals. It's not something that we can bypass or overlook if we're anticipating putting together the FY26 budget, which would then overlay additional increases on top of that. So what we found over the last 3 or 4 times that I've done this is that both methods get relatively close, and so
within, say, 50 to 100 grand.
yes.
Right?
So this time they're within based on just the information I have on the spreadsheet, 150,000, which again I feel like it's within that.
Small percentage.
Yeah, that I really.
Relatively small percentage.
Yeah, it brings us, relatively close, and I think.
Are you going off what's on the FY25 guidance tab? Is that where you're?
I'm in the FY26 guidance multiplier calculation,
The very
okay.
first one.
the first tab.
Yeah.
So based on what I just kind of explained, I've included the Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI amount of 3.4%. Our salaries are looking to be about 47% of the reduced guidance base, which would give us a multiplier of 1.8% on that overall amount, which would add $351,000 back into the budget, looking at FY26, adding back things like transfers, a reduced debt service. So if you'll notice from the amount we reduced the budget by for FY25 of $1 million, we'd be adding back $400,000. So we are retiring the bond for the middle school this year. We might have already made the final payment, or we'll make that in probably February of this year. So that bond is paid off and the school is ours. There is a significant increase in special education costs at this point, which is about $1 million, which is probably one of the more significant increases I've seen over the years. We do see a reduction in NHRS due to the rate change that I mentioned, and added in the San Bernard's HEA contract cost. I believe that was the second year contract cost. So looking at guidance relief items, so if, based on what the requested operating budget that was submitted, which included the new items that Kelly just indicated, and the complete $950,000 for that boiler piping correction that needs to be made. The operating budget requested would be a 9% increase from the prior year, which is substantial, but if you consider the $950,000, and in dollar amount, it's, let's see, $2.6 million, it's a $2.6 million increase. If we look at just the increases for that $1 million project at the middle school and the $1 million increase in special education, that's 1.9 of a $2.6 million increase. So while there are savings there, obviously from the retirement of debt service, some savings in NHRS, those two pieces account for a significant amount of the increase year over year. So without considering, I'd like to understand a little bit more about where health insurance stands, because some districts really have seen some substantial, anticipating some substantial rate changes. Without even considering that, and considering the things I just mentioned, we would be sitting at a guidance of $31.3 million, which is about $600,000 below the current request.
What was the amount? 31?
$31.3 million.
What was the guidance percentage on that?
I'm sorry.
The guidance multiplier to get there?
1.8%.
Using 1.8, okay.
Because it's adjusted, it's using 3.4% as the starting point, and then gets adjusted once we remove salaries. So 53% of the budget gets a 3.4%, and it yields like a 1.8% increase overall. So you can put 1.8% on the total or 3.4% on the lower, and it gets you to the same
So
place.
the 3.4% is based on contractual,
No, the 3.4% is CPI.
CPI.
non-contractual. So that's
No.
so our basic premise is 3.4.
3.4.
Guidance is 3.4.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted to know.
And that's just a proposal at this point.
It's just a proposal. It's just kind of
suggestion
like
or
a starting
maybe
point.
Starting point.
So, Kelly's acknowledged that there's some work to be done, as she's kind enough to do as we see this budget. And I would like to understand for a minute, before we talk about facilities, the health insurance, where the rates ended up.
The rates and this year they split them up. You know, usually it was one rate for whatever plan you have, but the co-op pretty much has the ABSOS plan, and for that plan the increase was 8.9%, which from what I'm hearing in other districts is a really good rate.
And so what's different for this planning cycle is that there won't be a recalculation of that rate in the spring. So usually we see a rate now, it's what we call the guaranteed maximum rate, and usually they come in at that guaranteed maximum,
been, yeah.
and usually a little bit lower.
Yeah.
But now they're moving toward this strict 1%, 1% amount that's being identified, and that's just it. There's
Right.
going to be no correction or adjustment of that, so we're at 8.9%.
And
Okay.
The budget that is being used to calculate this has that actual rate as opposed to
Yes, Linda updated everything to match what we did receive, yes.
So, on the benefit side, looking at health insurance, it's like a $421,000 increase in health insurance.
Do we have any feel, just in general, how much of that is just increased rate versus changing of plan distributions?
Well, we really don't know what those are going to be for FY26, so we base it on what happened in FY25.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, so whatever people have now is what we carried forward.
But
I haven't-
from a budgeting standpoint, are we comparing to last year's budget or last year's actual? Or this year's, I guess my point is, last year when we budgeted, we used the previous years, and I was of the impression that due to staff changes, it's, our plan distribution may have changed
It always
significantly from 20
changes.
But I mean, I thought it was a big change, 'cause we, in the co-op, I thought we had like a third turnover this year.
I
No, it was-
don't recall just how the plans changed, but I do know we had the 18.6% increase. So, you know, that's a big,
For this year.
yeah, for this year.
So what you're doing now is taking, so while the actuals on what was planned for FY '25 might incorporate that shift, it's that distribution of where our actual employees are right now
Yes.
that's driving the FY '26 estimate for the
Correct.
budget.
What you're comparing it to was to last year's budget?
Budget. So
Yes.
when I talk about a $421,000 increase, it's compared to last year's budget.
Now, we under budgeted for health insurance didn't we, because of the rate that actually came through?
Yes, because when we got the 18.6, let me think, yeah, it would have been in March.
That was
and
almost double what we had planned for,
yeah,
I think.
I'm sure there was something like that, yeah.
So does that factor at all into this consideration?
Well, Kelly would have the current rate structure, which would have incorporated any increase for this year, and then the 8.9% is applied to that set of
But in
rates.
terms of what you're talking about, the increase over last year,
Yeah, that $400,000 is gonna include
Over the adjusted.
what we didn't
Right.
budget for of that
so
18.6%.
is that part of the stuff that gets taken out?
no.
Should that be handled similarly to the piping, you know what I mean?
That's the discussion. Should
Yeah.
we make some consideration
Yep.
for that at all? Because the anticipated rates are rising, you know, in your perception, are they rising so much more significantly than CPI that we need to make some additional consideration
They
to the
certainly
budget?
did last year.
Mhm.
Can I, throw a couple of
Sure.
ideas on the table?
Sure. We're not changing any plans, right?
No, at this point, we're just basically throwing ways to maybe start thinking about maybe scaling back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And just two ideas. My understanding is that the social security increase for next year is 2.5%, not 3.4% as the CPI is. So one suggestion is, what if we were to use 2.5% instead of 3.4? In other words, replace that number, lower it, bring it a little bit to be consistent with social security increases. In other words, that's another marker. Maybe we might be able to save a few bucks there.
What's the 3.4 picked from?
Bureau of Labor Statistics.
For
I
which period? Do you know?
believe it was September,
'Cause what,
could have been August.
I'm trying to think,
I thought it
we
was
were
the
closer
same.
to 2 for contract CPIs, weren't we?
Yeah,
It's 2 and
yeah,
change.
I don't think it
know
was
if I still have it
3.4.
open, and I'm not online right now.
That's one
Mhm.
suggestion.
I'll double check
So
when I can.
the other suggestion is, if you know, every year we do the comparison of last year's budget versus last year's actuals.
Mm.
What I suggest is, why don't we use as a starting point the lower of the two? I mean, all I'm suggesting is if we save 151 here and maybe another 100K there, that begins to
We
get
are,
us thinking
we are,
about-
we are at the lower of the two.
Okay,
That using the actuals got us closer together, so we're already using the lower of the two.
okay. So the initial
So the-
starting point is
so the-
based on the actuals.
No, based on the actuals, we would be at 31.5 million versus 31.9, using the kind of traditional formula that we've
It's
used
a
in the
l-
past, we're a little bit lower.
So that's a lower one, okay.
We're at 31.3 versus the 31.9. So done.
Okay. If I think of others, I'll
So,
suggest it.
one of the things mentioned on the new items spreadsheet is that the 950,000 is the lowest amount we think it would be?
Well, I think, well, you guys, Tom, can address that better than I.
I haven't been given insight as to how that number was arrived at. We were led to believe, I thought that was an amount that needed to be added to allow us to do the work necessary with some potential additional monies coming out of the maintenance trust. So I don't think that that's a complete cost, but I think that that is believed to be the amount that we would have to come up with in addition to what we have elsewhere.
Right, but I was alluding to the fact that we're considering a bond beyond that, yeah.
So the and this is, we're holding off on talking about it, but if we're, I think it's safe to say, and Raul, correct me if you disagree, but we anticipate a recommendation coming from the committee for one, probably two bonded items that would cover this work and additional work to provide long-term overall savings to the district for their energy needs. And the target, the goal is to have the bond payment be no greater than and ideally less than what's dropping off. So you've got $950 in there and about $600 coming off. So we're looking to come up with a funding program that would have the new bond payments to be in the, I think, under six, perhaps closer to 500,000.
Okay, for both projects?
No, this one project is for HVAC, and
Yep.
that's the one I'm talking about.
Okay.
The second bond would be for the installation of solar panels that would be self-funding in the sense that it would be financed through a program where the cost of the finance payments are offset by the savings. They work with an external, a third party who pays for it, and they get the savings to make the payments, and any surplus goes to the district. Similar to what we did for lighting years ago.
Yeah, I do remember that.
So it's the HVAC work, which includes the boilers, but also adds in significant improvements and corrections to the middle school air handling and air quality.
So there would be two separate
Activities. Yeah.
activities. But based on the discussion we had 2 days ago, the number is not 950, it's 915.
Okay.
That's what was
Oh,
suggested as a
915.
budgeted item,
I didn't even notice that was different.
Okay.
okay? And then, again, based on what I'm reading, there would be eventually $30,000 of grants and rebates that would come from
Mhm.
that. So a discussion we had was, do we want to add this to the budget like we're doing, or should that would be included in a separate warrant article as part of something else?
Mhm.
Well-
And it isn't clear that we want to necessarily take that risk, given the issue of the pipes and
Right.
the
I
end
think
of
that-
life.
The risk of the bond.
I
Right.
think the
Mhm.
game plan would be to leave it in the budget, but have, before the budget vote, have the bond vote, and if the bond passed,
Then we reduce the
Right.
budget by that amount.
yeah.
Mhm.
So that's a good strategy, but for now, I think we can shave another 35K from the budget.
Yeah, I didn't notice that those were
Because the
different
number is
numbers, so I'll make
915,
that,
not
yeah, I'll make that
950.
correction.
Who prepared the spreadsheet, though?
Which spreadsheet are you talking about?
that
And this is what
Rob
we
was
discussed.
That
referring to.
came from Mike Davy.
Rob has a
Does
copy.
Mike
of
have
this.
all the
Okay.
information? Is that where we're getting all our information
Mhm.
regarding that estimate?
Mhm.
Okay. I didn't know if there was other.
No, I can double check with him and see if that, how sure he is that number is the number.
Okay.
All right,
All right.
and there's savings, energy savings amounts per year based on,
Yeah, none of
But
that
those
savings
wouldn't
is
really,
in there.
those
Yeah.
aren't savings we would necessarily, I mean, I don't know how long a project takes to, okay.
The idea
but
is
for our
if it was
purposes,
approved,
this
if
is the number to use.
Yeah.
most of the work, it's
Huh?
believed could be
In the summer.
done over a summer
Okay,
period.
so you might
Right.
But
actually realize some
the
savings.
two big unknowns are the items that we need to get available.
Right,
and
that's
supply.
why I'm always leery, these
Right.
days anyway, of
And-
putting that savings in the first year.
And then the other part is, are the people to do the work available?
Exactly.
Right. So if we adjust both the, like, if the piping repair adjustment that we were, based on the spreadsheet is 950,000, and I have 950,000 unit requests, and I make an adjustment on both sides, it still gets us to the same
Yeah.
differential because we're making the same adjustment, so.
From a timing standpoint, if the bond got approved, we would, whether the bond's approved or not, I believe the plan is to go forward with the piping and boiler upgrades.
Yes,
So if the bond got approved, then it would be paid for out of that pocket. If the bond doesn't get approved, it would get paid out of operating budget. But that aspect is likely to be initiated as quickly as possible once we have the funding source and the school can deal with the disruption.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the discussion we had, these were options that were gonna be presented to the school board, and they would decide as to best way forward.
yep.
Okay, so, going back to Raul's comment about reducing CPI, to 2.5% from 3.4, that would result in a reduction of about $50,000. Where did I just put it? I just calculated. I had it, just give me a minute. Recalculated, 698.
Geez, I was hoping it was gonna be
Oh, no, it's
500,000.
more than that, sorry. No, minus,
Well, 1% of the amount is.
about another 100,000. Yeah,
As far as the recommendation goes, I just think that whatever your traditional source is for CPI, for consistency's sake, you use that. I'm just surprised that there is something putting a 3+% number on the table based on all the reports that I have heard in recent times.
I do have the CPI Northeast Region report through September, and it is 3.4%.
And that's the one you normally use?
Mm-hmm.
Because we usually use the December one, right, for
November.
November?
Yeah, we're just not there yet. Like November.
Yeah, we usually November,
Is the
previous.
Northeast way out of line with the national average, do you know?
I don't know.
Because-
Mid-Atlantic is 3.4, New England is 3.4.
What's that?
This view,
Oh, I know why. Social Security uses a very different, doesn't use the full CPI.
Different basket,
Yep, they use a,
different basket of goods to set the rate.
so,
I'm just suggesting whatever number we use should be validated or should be a reference
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
that makes sense to people.
yeah. I just think use the same, if you're gonna call it a CPI-based calculation, we consistently use the
Yep.
same index.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, if you really wanted to grind, you take your 10 largest cost items and get your inflation rate for each one of those.
You could work on that,
I
Tom, as a
know.
side assessment if you'd like to, if
I was-
that's important to you.
I was thinking, I
Right.
was second guessing that
Well, you-
statement as it came out of my mouth.
Actually, I think you can do it with your two largest, and that is
So
labor rates,
Yep.
and the other is healthcare. And if you do that, you'll come up with a bigger number, because what you're using is heavily influencing our labor costs, because it's in the contract.
we're pulling it out.
No,
aren't
but
we?
I'm just saying, but those are the biggest.
But not health, we're not pulling out healthcare.
So,
Not healthcare though, right?
Right.
'Cause that-
Or we could potentially be, but-
Healthcare would be a good one to take a look
Yeah.
at, just for the sake
No,
of
I
looking
was
at it,
just,
yeah.
I can absolutely pull a more, complex list, but we
I'm
typically
not
don't.
asking you to do that.
Thanks, Tom, I appreciate
but I
that.
think-
My
been a
motivation
week.
is there are a number of increases in a number of areas, and
Yeah.
we need to
Yeah.
attempt to find a way to see if we can cut back a little by little, you know.
Right,
Yeah.
you're picking a number that you like, I mean, a basis that you like, and Social Security is a good
Yeah,
foundational number. Tom's just saying we've always done it this way.
that's,
and
those
to-
are
so to
good
do-
reasons,
Right, so do year-to-year comparisons, that would be more appropriate, so both good ideas, it's just.
And we
which
won't
one do
be
you pick?
taking a position this evening, so
Thank God.
what that does is allow us one more month to look at some of those factors, and as I said, I can get a more kind of detailed breakdown of the various categories that are getting to the composite.
Do you look at the revenue side too, when?
At this point, we don't, but you are aware that it is impactful. So now, if we were to consider just what we know at this moment about revenue, it would be a little concerning that there really isn't the $200,000. When we build a budget, Kelly pretty consistently uses $200,000 to $250,000. Sometimes I do ask her right before the March meeting to reevaluate revenue, just because we have, a few months more data at our disposal, just to see what we can eke out on that revenue side. So I would be concerned at this point that we don't anticipate having the $200,000 to $250,000 that we normally do. But, and I don't know at this point if Kelly's prepared to make an estimate of revenue. That's one of the last things we
Yeah.
do because of the focus on all the budget items.
Right.
But, I think I closed everything. So at this point, we don't look at that right now.
So what-
But you're aware that a reduction of revenue has obviously a further impact on what tax effort and
On
tax
tax
rates
effort,
end
yeah,
up
but
being.
not necessarily
Yeah.
the budget. But I
Yeah,
just-
yeah.
I have a question too, go
What
ahead.
elements, in your opinion, that are left in, that are subject to the 3 whatever percent, are the most volatile, that change the most year over year, not consistently inflationary, but randomly? I mean, we know special education goes
Mhm.
up and down all over the place, but you take that out, that's not subject to,
Right.
I don't know if
Healthcare
there's.
is certainly one of the
It's
most volatile
really-
ones,
it-
right? Yeah.
Healthcare.
It really is health insurance.
Yeah.
We can moderate over time things like teacher retirement. I think we had a year where we had no retirees. You might see retirees this year. That'll be in that one kind of, if we go from a year where we had none to a year where we have anticipate some, that's a bigger swing. Otherwise, it tends to be a level trajectory. It's really the facilities, the salaries and the benefits, those are really, and special education, but we do look at that separately. Those are really the biggest drivers. And I don't know, where do we stand with the transportation contract?
I think there's 2 more years.
Oh, okay. So,
Speaking of revenue, do
Mhm.
we have any sense of what's going to happen with the lawsuit about state funding of
haven't heard
public
anything
schools?
about that.
Yeah.
Still an issue, I mean,
Sure.
it could,
Mhm.
it could potentially double the contribution of the state.
Yeah,
It
well,
could.
that would be great.
Yay.
Or depending on who gets.
It depends on what happens in November, yeah.
Mhm.
or-
That's gonna be a big-
Or that number could get zeroed out if another
It-
one wins.
Right, it's a political
Yeah.
dynamic that's gonna influence how that comes out, but it's a significant number for us.
Yeah, it definitely
Make a
is.
big difference in how we look at the budget overall.
And
That's
in,
really
in
cool.
November, we'll see an estimate for adequacy, using the current calculations, which change annually, but, there are always some slight modifications and things like that. And in that case, there might be some impacts to Brookline, because there is a phase down of a set of funds that only Brookline receives, so
Yeah.
that affects the co-op as well.
Right.
For when they take the amount allocated to Brookline and then gets split between the co-op and, the Brookline School District, so there will be.
And that would motivate, perhaps a more dramatic change on the apportionment, right?
The phase down,
I-
it's a pretty small amount.
Yeah, it isn't, it is a phase down, and it isn't like it's taking it in half, it's like a, you know, they wanna moderate it, but it's just, you know,
So it's gonna be
It's a
really
fixed amount.
important that we come back to the table in December or late November.
November, yeah.
And try to anticipate what the impact of the election's gonna be on state funding. Cause that's gonna have a huge impact on us.
Good, yeah.
The other issue is, by the time we come back next month, we would have received our tax assessments for our properties, right?
Mhm.
And so people will, there will perhaps a shock treatment. I have no idea what that's gonna be like. But that may have a influence on
And that's
what we end up doing.
something we can talk about in November as
Right.
well, the tax rates and the unreserved fund balances, because I think I don't know about Brookline, but I know Hollis and the co-op returned more than anticipated.
Yeah.
I know Hollis as a town, did, or was,
We
or
haven't
you're
set the
working on.
we haven't set the number
You
yet.
haven't set it yet, but
but
you're
there's a
working on
significant
using
number.
some unreserved
Yeah,
funds
there's a significant number
do
that's
some
gonna go back.
offset.
And the tax rate will be established probably next week.
Yeah,
It'll be publicized next week.
so,
In fact, however that ends up being, that may have an influence in the overall strategy regarding the the maintenance and the facilities strategy.
Well, it'll influence the personalities at the legislative body, that's for sure.
so I will just for everyone's kind of frame of reference, if I were to take out of the district's operating budget request, if I were to remove the increase for special education and the piping, that operating budget would be a 2.3% increase from the prior year.
Wow.
Which is really, given the 8.9% increase in healthcare and, you know, the implementation of the new contract and things like that, a 2% increase in an operating budget is something I don't think we've seen in a long
No.
time.
Well,
So,
You say labor, but now going into the second year of the contract, it's a relatively modest increase.
yes, compared to, where we started,
I mean,
so.
but just in general, it.
Yeah, yeah,
We could potentially be bonding that 950 or 915 or whatever
Yes.
the number is.
yes,
So if that
Correct.
comes out of the budget, we're already below guidance.
yeah, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
well, okay, that's
Mhm.
that's
No.
hopeful.
Okay, we're done.
No,
That's
because
hopeful.
I thought,
Well, there'll be a bond payment, but it won't be.
but I thought, was the nine, I thought you took it out before applying the 3-point-something%,
I apply the 3 point something percent,
and then added it
add
back.
that, and then add the 950 in.
So it was not there, so the 1.7 would
So if
change,
I add
but
in-
the 3-something would.
So the 3-4 wouldn't, right?
If
The
I
3-4
don't
is
add,
guidance.
if I just leave the 3% and don't make an adjustment for the piping repairs, I wish I could put this to 0. There we go. We would be $1.5 million below the current operating budget because there's a $950,000 item in there. So we have to look at whether it's 915, 950.
Right.
But right now, we're gonna go with 950 because that's what's in the spreadsheet, knowing that there's movement on both sides of the problem. We would be, now we're 600, if we put that back in and say, okay, we recognize the importance and the necessity of doing that, we'll consider that outside of guidance, we're $600,000 below the request at this point. So,
Right, because guidance is 31,948.
yep,
You take 950 out of that roughly, you're gonna get 31,000. You're you're below guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're gonna, actually, you're taking out a 31,342.
Well, but I'm gonna take it out of both sides then. Right, so if
Well, why would you change guidance, though, if we're gonna use the same number?
no, if, wait, say that one
If
more
we
time.
didn't have the expense period, she's
If
saying
we didn't have the expense period on
Yeah.
either side,
Right,
So we didn't take it out and we didn't put it back in.
yeah, okay.
we're still $600,000 below.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
but that's still a good number, right?
And that's based on not paying the bond, right?
correct, there's no, that includes the reduction in debt service, it has no consideration for the additional warrant article. for
Right,
the
that's
bond.
right, that's right.
Yeah, so maybe we throw 50,000 in for a bond, and that's,
Yeah,
We're
the
still below
first
guidance.
year of a bond.
Yeah, yeah,
it's pretty good.
First
Pretty
year
good.
of a bond payment would be interest only, and then the larger payment is the second year.
Yeah.
If we were to go through a traditional way through the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank, although I think they shifted their calendar a little bit. If we're going through a lease, the
The first is actually
the payments
higher.
are equal from the beginning, and we don't have that benefit in the first year.
It's
So
not-
from our perspective, it may make sense to take that out,
The bond.
just bond it by itself,
Yeah,
and we can
so let's hope the bond
justify the
passes.
criticality of why it needs to be done.
Yeah. I mean,
And by
it's-
itself, it's almost insignificant.
That number is so significant
But
Yeah, it's
that
really-
we have to discuss it in the light of the overall budget. This is the abnormal part of the budget.
Right.
But we are
Just-
not willing to take it out of the
Right.
budget at this point in
Right.
time, just because of the concern about,
You can't, yeah,
about the funding source.
yeah.
Question that I have, historically, how often have you issued guidance that deviates significantly from your formulaic approach?
I would say we do we deviate from the formulaic approach by addressing items outside of that guidance relief. And so I would say in the past 5 years, we've done it 2 or 3 times. But we had a couple of good years, Kelly. We 1 year we calculated guidance and it was already higher than the budget we were looking at. That was when I thought the spreadsheet was completely wrong.
Yeah, I remember that.
So we've had some years where we didn't have to do that too. Just, for whatever reason, healthcare was more moderate.
Yeah.
We did have years where it was only like a 4 to 6% increase
we
and
did.
things
How
like
about
that.
going the other way? Have you had situations where you said, the guidance says this is where it should be, but that's just too much?
We kind of did that last year, and did push on guidance last year, and you were still able to make guidance.
Right.
So,
I think they
I
came
feel
back with lower.
I like where we are right now. I think this is a good view because of Kelly's confidence that she has more things to evaluate, and we know of other things that are still changing.
Right.
Your facilities committee is gonna be getting better numbers, that's gonna improve things. So,
I don't know that it will improve things.
well,
Yeah,
shift
I'm-
things,
accurate.
I'm not
change
sure.
things.
The accuracy.
I'm
Yeah,
not sure
that's
I
true.
can find 600,000, but I know
But,
I
and
can
that,
find
and that's,
more.
well, and that's, the consideration I would continue to look at is that health insurance piece.
Yeah,
So if I took half of that increase,
mhm,
because we would expect there to be, some type of, where's my benefits, there they are, of that. That's another 200,000, and so if we were to consider that as a budget committee as an offset to guidance, that would put us about $400,000 short of,
Yeah.
guidance. And I guess where I would like to understand, and maybe in November or December, Lauren might have some more information to share, since that increase in special education is literally like the most significant
Yeah.
I can recall in a very long time.
Well, you may remember me mentioning last month that we have some 6th graders that are coming up,
Yes.
so.
And I would not, I'd be happy to include a non-public as part of our next meeting.
Mhm.
I'm not looking for, detailed student information to be shared with the budget committee at all, but maybe just a little bit more of an understanding of what could be driving a $1 million increase in special education, because that's significant.
That's significant.
And especially since I know that we had like a $500,000 underrun, and I know, for FY '24, and I know that it can change year over year. And it has, I've spoken to it at, I think, every other meeting I say, we had this great underrun, and the next meeting is, unfortunately, we have this big overrun.
Mhm.
So I understand that it changes, but aside from the $500,000 underrun at the end of '24, we had an increase anticipated for '25. So then another million on top of that is a significant increase.
Mhm.
And so I would personally appreciate just a little bit more
Yep.
information, and I think maybe budget committee members, you might just want a better understanding of some things with special education, because we
Absolutely.
haven't had a conversation with Lauren in I think a couple of years. And if she feels, like I said, I don't anticipate there being a sharing of personal information and things like that, but if she's more comfortable with a non-public session, we'll be happy to do
Sure.
that as well.
All right,
So.
I'll make that happen.
I would rather it be presented in a sanitized fashion so
Yes.
it doesn't have to be in a non-public
That's what I
session.
would prefer as well.
Well, she'll know what the boundaries are. She's
Yeah,
got-
and
Right,
we,
but the
and
thing-
but as budget
I'd
committee members,
rather
we have our
give
own boundaries about the types of questions that can really be asked.
Give us that
and things, so.
information to allow the discussion to happen and.
And I think the last time we did it, we were in public session,
Right,
so,
we were.
like I said, I'm not looking for
I
anything.
think one of the
Right.
fundamental questions that we face when we're at these kind of critical junctions is there something that we can do internally to bring that to increase our capability versus requiring external resources,
Mhm.
because usually when we see these really big expenses, it's due to external costs.
Mhm.
Transportation even, yeah.
Yep, it could be transportation, it could be a skill set, it could be,
Well,
Out
we-
of district placement.
Yeah.
And we've tried to kind of address transportation by changing like to the van use and things like that.
but one of the
Um,
one of the reasons I think that's a really important discussion is that right now we are gated by what we can pay for certain services, certain staff members by the professional staff contract. And if that professional staff contract is creating a situation that is preventing us from having both improved services and reduced costs, I'm speaking only for myself at this point, but I would like to bring that to the school board, see whether the school board would like to perhaps consider approaching the union about some type of sidebar or whatever that would allow us to provide the best services we can at the most cost-effective manner. Do you follow where I'm going with that?
Sure.
So for instance, the fact that we can't fill a position, part of the reason we can't fill it is that the people who are in those positions can earn double to triple the amount by being a contract worker. But having spoken with people in those kind of positions in the past, just on a casual basis, many of them don't like being an independent contractor because of the hassle, but it's just too great a discrepancy.
Mhm.
If there were a way to bridge that gap, it might be preferable for all,
Mhm.
but right now our contract does not allow for that.
Right.
So that's where I'd like to understand whether it's, we're just, this is the perfect storm kind of situation, or is it we're in a corner, boxed into a corner?
If it's gonna be a significant cost driver, I mean, we need to really understand it better and come up with a good strategy for dealing with it.
For what it's worth, it's a national issue. It's
Mhm.
not a, it's not us. think the healthcare number that Kelly talked about, we're seeing these astronomical numbers, but in the grand scheme of things, we're still doing really well. I was listening to something on the way in today. They were talking about it's a totally different situation, but the cost of homeowners insurance.
Heard that.
And people, I don't know what you folks pay, but I'm paying a few $1,000s for homeowner insurance. The average homeowner insurance in Florida, they said, is over $10,000.
And it may double this year, you said.
Yeah.
It may
And-
double.
That's crazy.
And yeah, I've seen double-digit increases, but not triple-digit increases.
Right.
Actually, I shouldn't say I did see a triple-digit increase in one of on a
My
policy.
understanding is that years ago, there used to be some federal government programs that help you insure homes on the water front.
They still do.
Well,
but
that's flood insurance, and it's FEMA.
these are not.
Yeah.
These
Yeah,
are
but
because
that may help reduce the cost, but you wonder if some of those programs are going away.
No, what
No.
that's not necessarily.
It's a different thing altogether.
These are places. They said the biggest one last year was hail damage. Colorado got wiped out by hail. They said.
Wow.
So I'm just my only point in saying this is that sometimes we look at the numbers and somebody told me about real estate. The worst thing you can have is a memory, because you judge things by what you're used to, and it gives you a distorted view. I think that we tend to look at ourselves in isolation and not the overall things. The cost of goods, the availability of resources. So this is my way of applauding you and your colleagues for keeping it as affordable as you have.
We try.
Okay, so at this point, since there are still, since we're not a quorum, and still some things and questions to evaluate, some considerations for some of the costs, some review of some of the budget, does everyone feel comfortable going with, right now, what would be proposed is without any consideration for adjusting for health insurance? The budget committee would recommend a budget that's like $606,000 below the request at this point. I would consider that a pretty conservative view, and something, it's obviously not something we're taking an official position on, and in November we'll have something more specific, but at least now gives Kelly you some direction. And that would put us that would have put the operating budget at
Just have to make a call.
$31,342,963.
Yeah, I think that's as good a number as any right now, and
Yeah.
it's based on at least a consistent methodology
Mhm.
with previous years.
Yeah.
This is where we would have been any other year.
Mhm.
And after discussing the extraordinary costs that are in the budget,
Yeah.
I think we could go on either side of that number.
Right.
So
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
It's the best number we can work with today.
Mm-hmm. So right before the meeting, Kelly shared some information with regard to the SAU budget, which I did have as an agenda item next, and then we'll get to the school board piece in the calendar. And so because the rates for insurance and the distribution of the superintendent's or the central office staff, there were some additional realized savings. I'll get everybody this latest draft of the SAU budget, but it did drop the budget by another $12,500. So it's a 0.5% increase over the current year, and there would not be any other anticipated changes at this time. So I'll get this to everybody so that you can review it, and we'll talk about it again on
Okay.
Thursday, and I think,
You mean next
in
month.
November. And I think, Kelly, do you have a date for the public hearing for that? I don't know when the next governing board meeting is in
I'm
December.
sure we do have the day, but I don't know it at the
So
moment.
so there'll be a public hearing
It's
on
in
that budget
December,
at
yeah.
the December governing board meeting.
It's
So
usually
it's
the second week in
Yeah.
December, but I don't know
I think
the
it's
exact
usually
date.
a Wednesday,
It's usually on a Thursday.
Thursday.
We're about to discuss.
The next governing board meeting, Tom, do you recall?
Yeah, do you
Is
know
it
when
the
the public
12th?
hearing is in December?
SAU governing board.
Yeah, I do.
Not done yet, Raul.
I'm just, I'm not leaving any, is it?
Okay.
A little bit of
The SAU
housekeeping.
governing board meeting is on the 12th.
The 12th, okay, so that'll be the public hearing. I just mentioned that there's a new view of the SAU budget, so that Kelly shared right before this meeting, so I'll get that out to everybody. Results in another $12,000 worth of savings by making the adjustment for the health insurance rate change based on the distribution of staff usage.
I have it. It's
Okay,
weird.
so-
I have the meeting starting at 6, but I think the hearing is probably at 6:30 or 7.
Yeah, we usually start at, it could even be 6:15, something like that.
Okay, so I'll share that information when it's available. So as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to carry the calendar information down to the SBU update part of our meeting because, what I anticipate Tom sharing is, a little bit about the discussion that took place at the last board meeting. I wish I could find my calendar. Where did my calendar
Is that
go?
the one regarding the district meeting?
Yes. And I want to thank Tom Solon, Tom Enright, and Matt McGuire for their attendance.
I didn't have a
I shared
choice.
it with everybody, the link, yeah, you had to be there. I shared the link with everyone to the YouTube of the meeting, and the board spent an hour talking about kind of annual meeting logistics with our moderator, Drew Mason. He was, I would say, open to the comments and the suggestions made from both budget committee and school board members. And I think it resulted in a really good conversation. And so, Tom, I'll let you take it from there, and then we'll kind of, if you could talk a little bit to, that conversation led to, Drew anticipating coming back with some more guidelines or his decision on some of the things that were brought forward, but it also led to a discussion about the special meeting, the timeline, and things like that. So I was actually hoping we had a quorum tonight because I did want the budget committee to take a position on something with regard to apportionment. But we'll have a little bit of a conversation, Tom, when we talk about some of those meeting dates. So if you wouldn't mind giving us that update, that would be great.
Sure. The primary conversation that you allude to covered 3 main topics. The first was the question about the ordering of warrant articles. And Tom Enright spoke to his dissatisfaction that petition warrant articles were moved ahead of school board and budget committee warrant articles that were viewed as necessary for running the school. And his request was that we consider increasing the requirements for passage of a motion to move an article from a simple majority to a supermajority, and the numbers that were discussed were either a 2/3 or 3/5 majority.
I thought I saw 60% as a starting point or some point.
Well,
I think it's-
Drew asked, what do you want, 60%? And Tom said that would be good. And he said, well, what about 2/3? And he said, that's fine too. And I think the majority of the people present were supportive of making the hurdle as high as possible so that it was clear that it was the will of the majority. The feeling being that a lot of people who come into it don't necessarily know all the aspects of what's going on, but there's competing desires, and one of the competing desires is to have articles that are going to have a long voting period be presented earlier so that people can vote without it happening at the end. There's a lot of elements that go into it, but the feeling was that if there is a higher hurdle and a discussion, it may bring about a more informed decision and a shorter meeting, or at least a shorter meeting for those elements that were brought forth on the official warrant before petition warrant articles. I shouldn't say that, the others aren't official. So that was one element. The second element was the question of moving a question. In the past, not the recent past, but in the past, moving a question was taken as a literal activity that if approved, a motion to move the question, if approved, would end debate immediately. At some point in time, there was a change in the baseline rule that said that anyone standing in line to speak would be allowed to speak when the question was moved. And the comments that were made by a variety of people, including myself, were, oftentimes there can be 20 to 30 people in line when a question is moved. At 2 minutes a person, that's an additional 40 to 60 minutes of discussion. So it requires a supermajority to move a question. If the majority, if that large majority of the people present have heard enough that they want to end debate, should it actually end debate? And that was that was a request that seemed to have majority support at the meeting. And then the final one was something that had been brought to our attention by our legal team multiple times over the past years. They attend a lot of different meetings, district meetings, and they came back and said, you need to be aware that when a petition warrant article is presented, there is no single petitioner, and that they were surprised and didn't really think it was proper that an individual person was given the opportunity to make a presentation on a petition warrant article when there was nothing particular about that individual that separated them out from all other petitioners. All other petitioners have their opportunity to speak during the discussion period, but one is given the opportunity to speak make a 10-minute presentation. And they said that there's nothing in a petition warrant that, or in a petition that identifies someone as the official spokesperson for that petition warrant article.
So the implication is that a lot of people are not given the voice to speak, or is it that it's taking too much time to
The implication
make a
is
case
that,
for it?
that of two things. One is that it is taking time, but more importantly, that a single individual's opinions are being emphasized over those of others who may have been the petitioner. Because there's an assumption, I think, on the public that the person who's speaking is in fact speaking for all the petitioners, when there's nothing in the process that has really empowered them, and Drew has simply been allowing
Accommodating,
the
right.
person who approaches him to do it. And he said at the meeting, and it occurred to me later, that he, his methodology is whoever makes the motion. And it's worked out that the person who's made the motion has been the person who came to him ahead of time. It's almost choreographed, I'll call it that way. And if that's the case, since it's the board's warrant, perhaps the board should be the presenter if you want to be if he wants to have a presenter, because some board member should move the articles like they do the other ones. And I think
So that suggestion is,
so the suggestion is
the
that
petition warrant article should go through the school board.
the suggestion was that a petition warrant article should not have a presenter. That anyone who wants to speak to a petition warrant article should do it within the context of the normal time at the microphone.
Just like there are other warrant articles that came through the process and we had public hearings. So in theory, those warrant articles that are being proposed should go through the same independent process and eventually.
And if they're money articles, if the petition warrant article is a money article, it also has to go to a public hearing.
Right,
So that's their opportunity, right?
So we should create a process for all the warrant articles to come in through it.
Right.
And we do have that process,
Right, and an independent.
but it's not being used, because in many cases, at the hearings, no one is speaking to the petition warrant article. Where the school board is required to hold those hearings, but in recent years, not even one of the petitioners has shown up. It's usually been people who, if anyone shows up, it's usually been someone speaking in opposition, but it's sort of speaking to an empty room. So the request was to stop giving a 10-minute window of time to someone who wants to speak to a petition warrant article, to instead say that they be done through the hearings if they exist, and either way at the normal discussion period.
So it, in theory, should be just a 2-minute presentation, position for yea or nay or whatever, and then at some point somebody cuts off discussion and we're done.
And Drew acknowledged that even if you're not a presenter, if you know in advance that you want some supporting material available to you when you're going to come up to the mic to speak about a warrant article, whether it's a petition warrant article or another, historically, they have allowed members of the public to give material for display, so that would
Put
be
slides
the-
up.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So those were the three main things that occurred regarding the discussion about annual meeting.
So if he is gonna absorb all of this and come up with some decisions or at least recommendations and then adjust his briefing at the beginning of the district meeting and
Yeah,
then
and the list of
people will
rules,
vote
right,
at
and
that
the
point.
And
To
the list
adopt
of
the
rules
rules,
that get
Yeah.
included in the.
Moderator presents the rules, legislative body either accepts or
Modifies,
changes.
right.
Right, or modifies the rules, and then we vote to approve the rules and accept them for the meeting. I
So-
think that's, yeah, I mean, it can still be changed from the floor.
So Drew took it, he was extremely helpful and spent a lot of time making sure he understood what was being asked. He wants to go back and review it in the context of what he believes is his legal requirements as a moderator, as well as his personal understanding of what he thinks is best. He's also likely to get contact with our legal staff to cover some of the details that he questioned, specifically around the petition warrant article aspect.
So should we have him come to one of our future meetings before the public hearing to, if there are gonna be any adjustments to
Oh,
the
yeah,
process to-
I think he was planning on addressing the board at your November meeting, right?
Yes,
I think
well,
that was the follow-up.
I think he's coming back, he being Drew.
Yeah,
We're also asking for, someone from the legal group to be at that meeting.
okay.
I guess my thought is that the public, if there's been a change in the process, they
Well-
should be given an indication ahead of time prior to.
Yeah, and Drew's rules are printed in advance and published,
Right.
so, and available, so.
So then the other thing you talked about was the dates, and I was just looking, I thought I had the calendar.
So I did find the calendar.
But oh, here it is. The issue is, we've talked about having, and in fact, Nanda, we talked about, there was, I think, might have actually been a vote, but we do want to have a special meeting, special district meeting with two likely aspects of it. One is to look at amending the Articles of Agreement to clarify the ability to seek a municipal bond, municipal lease as a funding mechanism in the co-op. The way the Articles of Agreement are written, they explicitly allow bonding, but municipal leases were not in practice for school districts back when they were written, so it doesn't talk about them, and some people say that since it explicitly authors bonding, maybe that is to the exclusion of municipal leasing. It hasn't prevented us from having a municipal lease, and they're treated and handled very similarly to bonds, and they haven't been rejected by DRA when we've had them. But most recently, when there was a question about a municipal lease for the turf field, that complexity was brought up, and we chose not to even consider a municipal lease because of the ambiguity. We would like to resolve that because it may be beneficial to our financing options if we can consider a municipal lease going forward for things such as the facilities and energy options. So the second one is we are going to be hitting the 5-year mark since the last change to apportionment. And I didn't realize this, but apparently it's quite uncommon in the state for apportionment to get changed, but it's not uncommon in our community. So to avoid an unplanned and unanticipated petition warrant article or some other motion, would have to be a petition warrant article to change apportionment. The question is, does the board want to proactively introduce a motion to look at, well, I won't say change apportionment, because the way it's now possible is you can essentially reaffirm the existing apportionment formula and have it lock in for another 5-year cycle. That was not possible in the past, but it is now possible. When consulting with our legal counsel, they said if you do it by having a simple up or down type motion that's worded, we will
You're
we
affirming
will
the current.
continue with the current apportionment formula, yes or no. That does not leave the door open for an alternative amendment to apportionment. So if a proposal was made to continue with what we have, including the plus $1 thing, we could have the full discussion, do all of the things about it, and it's either yes or no. If, however, the proposal was to go back to what it was without $1, that would be a change which would in fact open the door to all possible changes. The board does not want to put the whole thing open for discussion without having a prolonged discussion period and meetings like we do in the past. But if there is if there is support for just continuing, they would like to know that and perhaps facilitate it. The complication is that it has to happen at least 5 years after the date of the last change, which puts it in the last week of, or I think
January,
the
maybe?
middle of
Yeah.
January.
It's toward the
But-
end, yeah.
But Drew, our moderator, is not available until the beginning of February. So
Can he appoint the substitute?
That-
they can, but it just introduces levels of complexity. Who would be that person? Right now, what we're looking at is what would be the likely date, and I think the latest input we've got was that legal suggests that it be at the later date and not push it back into January.
Right, so we had talked about the.
January 30th was one of the dates we were looking at.
Right, so the dates for the public hearing for the co-op is February 3rd. The snow date was the 4th, and so there was discussion, February 3rd's a Monday. February 4th is the Tuesday, so there was discussion of using the snow date as the date to hold the special meeting. And if we did need the snow date for the public hearing, we would align them and run the public hearing and then the special meeting, right?
That seemed to be the most palatable choice.
Right,
We can't do it on the 5th because Brookline has their deliberative session
right.
on the 5th.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a very narrow window of opportunity.
Right. Is there any, could it be later in the month?
Not much, because it has to be
A certain number of days before the.
25 days before.
Before
The district
the
bid.
district.
Yes.
Okay, that's it.
And this year, the co-op is the
It's
first
first.
district meeting.
Mm-hmm. On the 4th, by the way. The annual meeting date for the co-op is the 4th with the snow of March. So it's the 3rd and 4th for public hearing and special meeting snow date, and then March 4th
3rd
and
and
5th.
4th of February for
Yeah.
the public hearing.
And then.
And then the 4th and 5th, excuse me, when is the?
March.
My school district, oh, it is, yeah.
Yeah,
The
3rd.
4th and 5th of March for the
district
co-op
meeting
district meeting.
And
So
snow date.
next year, February is 28 or 29 days.
3 days.
28?
So we don't gain an extra day.
No. So, so the discussion I wanted to have a little bit tonight, was in hopes of being able to provide a position of the budget committee on apportionment. We are lacking in membership, it's not a quorum. I could share this information with the rest of the members and get a sense of the committee. It wouldn't be an official motion, but just wanted to just get some initial feedback on the thoughts about changes to the apportionment formula. If there's other considerations you think need to be made, if you think there needs to be a change to the formula, if you think that, and just kind of get general input and information.
In my simple approach to this, at a glance, I'm comfortable with the way it is. But there always, having lived in this community for a long time, I remember the days when there used to be a simpler approach, and that was, what is the total cost per student, how many are in Brookline, how many are in Hollis. So, for reference, if we do that extra calculation and compare the two, well, at least we know where we are. And therefore, it may turn out that the delta is not that much from what it used to be years ago. So that gives us in terms of
We never
in
had
term
it
of
the way you're
reference.
describing it for the co-op.
I thought we did many years ago.
No, we started out as 50-50 which is what the state requires, 50% ADM and 50% evaluation, and we've gradually moved to where we are now. I don't think we ever had a period when all of it was 100% ADM.
I think we did.
I don't think so. I think
I'm going back 20, 30
I thought we
years.
went to 90-10. I thought the closest was 90-10 for everything.
I'll have to go back and look.
Well, I'm basically.
Drag those files off of that hard drive.
Do you really want to? But either way.
Yeah.
My point here is we should at least make an attempt to create a second calculation just to provide some reference. Because to demonstrate that the current formula is fair, right?
Okay, you're never going to do that, Raul, because fair, it means different things to different people. If you're going to compare it to a benchmark, I would compare it to the benchmark of what the default is for a co-op.
For the definition of a co-op.
Right. And that is 50-50.
Well, that may be a third approach.
Why is that the default?
Because that's where a co-op starts by RSA. If they don't choose to change from it, that's the initial position by RSA is it's 50% ADM, 50% evaluation.
All I'm basically saying is most people in the district are not experts at this, and they will understand something that's simple. And a simple approach is what I just suggested. And just for reference, I would like to know where that falls.
But
Because
I don't understand how you're choosing that benchmark.
because that's what I remember from 20, 30 years ago.
Not here.
I believe it was. I mean, maybe you're right. I'm just suggesting that's another
Hold on, everybody.
approach.
20 or 30 years ago, I know it. 20 or 30 years ago, I know what you're referring to. And yes, you were, I think you might have, I know it was something that worked out to 1/3, 2/3, and that was when ADM and evaluation had the same ratio. That 1/3 of the students approximately 1/3 of the students were Brookline, 2/3 were Hollis, 1/3 of the property value or property value in Hollis was approximately.
All I'm saying is.
Apportionment based on 100% ADM beginning in FY08.
Yeah, so that was back when it was that, but
Formula, and then we started the formula change. So we did have 100%
yeah,
ADM.
long time ago. I thought you were talking about like 10, 20 years ago.
2008 is 16 years ago.
Was there any reason to change it?
Was there or is there?
No.
Depends who you ask. The people in
That-
Brookline think there's a big reason to change
An
it.
empirical reason.
So that
Yeah,
apportionment
'cause they-
formula was in place until through FY15. In FY6,
100% ADM through
Yep.
15?
yep. In FY16, we changed to the 95.5, 100, and then
Remember that?
in 2021, FY21, we changed to 95.5, 100 plus $1.
We had a different one before that.
Nope.
Raoul's daughter.
FY08 to FY15.
What are you